Hello, my friends. I'm actually feeling a little sad today because I think our little guy is growing up and I'm going to miss him. He's such a funny little fellow. Um, I'm not saying that's going to happen abruptly in today's diary entry, actually, explicitly not. But reading ahead through April, um, I can tell you things are really about to change for him, and he is going to do his best to rise to the occasion. Um, and correspondingly, the diary entries are starting to get longer and more packed with information. And funnily enough, things are shifting a bit. Maria is about to have her 16th birthday, and she's the one in the April diary entries who ends up being sort of seized by teen angst and acting out a little. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that when it actually happens. So this is actually our last diary entry for March, and we go on to April, and Dimitri's been quite busy. As you know, there were all these festivities. I think it must have been maybe the feast day of the Horse Guards or something. I should look that up, because the fact of the matter is that every regiment or unit had its own feast day, just like individual people had name days. And so that may have been what was going on. But so we resume on 28th March, and the last diary entry was 25th March, and it was basically just very cursory saying there was the parade today, and I will write more tomorrow. And then he didn't write more tomorrow or the next day, and so we're at the 28th, and he's referring to events that happened in the previous days when he wasn't writing, and I'm a little confused about what was happening on which day because there are competing things, but I will leave that to you to sort out. And this diary entry of the 28th, which was a Tuesday, is such a long one that I'm actually going to break it into two parts. Otherwise, I'm going to end up going on for a half an hour, which I don't want to do. Okay, so two parts, each of which has two paragraphs. So we're actually having paragraphs in the diary entries now. All right, 28th March, Tuesday, 1906. At lunch on 25th March, I sat next to Biskupski and another person whose name I have forgotten. Biskupski said some very interesting things, for example, about the traditions of the regiment, etc. Fortunately, this time Uncle Nicolasha didn't make me stand with the officers, which I very much feared would be the case. Yesterday we began fasting, and as usually happens, one simply gets used to it. Yesterday evening I was terribly naughty, and everything struck me as funny. We went to that palace in the morning and evening, of course, and what was great was that we went in a carriage. Yesterday I went to Wilson, who hurt me terribly. He himself said that the nerve was exposed, the brute. G.M. has had a terribly cute little dog at his place for several days now. It's a fox terrier, a gentleman, and is only 6 weeks old. G.M. will give it to Maria on April 6th, although I don't think she deserves such a gift. But he's so terribly sweet. He bites, true, and it hurts a lot, but he's an angel. I finished The Noble Nest today. Oh, how good it was. But Rudin was just as good. I don't know which I like better. Both are beautifully written, and I'm sorry that I'm done with them. These last 2 evenings, Uncle Nicky and I didn't play billiards. We only played twice, and I won both times. What joy. I'm so frightfully sorry that I wasn't able to be on horseback for the parade of the 25th. I really wanted to. Okay, so that's the first 2 paragraphs of the diary entry. Lots and lots to talk about, and let's start with Biskupski, this figure who turns up at the lunch, the big celebratory lunch on the 25th of March. Dmitri is seated next to him, and another person, we don't know who the other person is because he forgot. Biskupski was, I guess, would he have been an officer in the Horse Guards? I have a list of Horse Guards officers, so as usual, I should have looked that up. But anyway, Dmitri likes the fact that he's talking about the traditions of the regiment and finds him interesting. Well, I'm sorry to say that Biskupski turned out to be a bad egg, a very bad actor indeed. In the immigration. So he does figure later in Dmitri's diary entries after the revolution. He was one of the emigres who settled in Germany, and the ones who settled in Germany were mostly the ultra right wingers, and Biskupski was one of those. And Dmitri, I think, only met him once after the revolution, but because he was involved in monarchist politics after the revolution, he is mentioned in the diaries, and thank God Dmitri didn't like him. I would be disturbed if Dmitri, as an adult, had actually liked this guy or approved of what he was doing, because basically, so he was a general. At the time of this lunch, he was not a general. In fact, he was only, I think, 28 years old. But later on, he was a general. Before the revolution, at some point, he became a general. His name was Vasily Viktorovich. And after the revolution, he really dived right into being a right-wing troublemaker, from my perspective anyway. So he was in Germany, and he was a participant in the Kapp Putsch, which I think was 1919. It was a failed putsch. They were the right-wingers were trying to overthrow the, who was it? It was Ebert, who was, I guess, the chancellor or the political head of Germany at that time, and he was on the, I think center-left. Would that have been Weimar? I guess so. And they were trying to overthrow him, and they took over, some city. Was it Berlin? And they held it for like 24 hours or something like that. But then there was a general strike, and the whole thing fell apart, and people just did not want them. But then he was a wealthy man at that point. He'd sold some property that he had in the Far East. He'd sold it to the Japanese and had made a fortune. And so apparently he was one of the early financial backers of the Nazi Party in the 1920s, and allegedly he even hid Hitler after the Beerhall Putsch in Munich. And then in 1922, maybe the most horrible thing that he did, he must have been involved in it. He was never arrested, I don't think. So his secretary and sort of his right-hand man, his deputy, tried to assassinate Paul Milyukov in 1922, and Paul was shielded by, was it Dmitry Nabokov? It was the father of the famous novelist Nabokov, stepped in front or pushed Milyukov out of the way and was himself shot and killed. And Paul Milyukov had actually been someone that Dmitri in London had made overtures to and wanted him to be a sort of teacher and mentor. And Paul Milyukov wasn't really interested in playing that role, but he did refer Dmitri to some books and to some other people that he could study with. And then later, in the 1930s, Milyukov would turn out to be something of a fan of Dmitri's. And so Dmitri was kind of jeered at by some of the right-wing element for being in touch with and being on friendly terms with Milyukov, but here I am digressing as usual. So, Biskupski became quite an ardent Nazi initially, but then in 1933, when Hitler took power as chancellor, for some reason the Nazi government imprisoned Biskupski for something between 3 and 4 months. And then in 1936, he was again in the good graces of the party and was appointed to be Hitler's liaison to the White Russian emigre community in Germany. Then he kind of got fed up with the Nazis. He was imprisoned again, and I don't know. He lived until 1945. I don't know what ultimately happened to him, although I'm sure it wouldn't be hard to find out. But anyway, Dmitri here, as a 14-year-old, is seated next to him at lunch and finds him an interesting person, especially with respect to regimental traditions. Okay, there's this reference to Uncle Nikolasha didn't make me stand with the officers. So I don't know what he means by that. Uncle Nikolasha, of course, was Grand Duke Nikolai Nikolaevich, and he was the commander of the guards in St. Petersburg Military District. So whenever anything like this took place, he was the, aside from the Tsar, he was the commander and the choreographer and the organizer of all of it, and he didn't make Dmitri stand with the officers. Well, sounds like the kind of thing that would be fun to do, standing with the officers, but Dmitri had apparently been fearful that he would have to do that, and then he didn't. Okay, yesterday we began fasting, so Lent has been going on since the end of February, but as is typical in Orthodox families, among all but the most zealous people, God bless them, you wait until towards the end, towards Holy Week, to start your fasting. It's a pretty strict fast. It's no meat, of course, no oil, no wine, and also no dairy. That's the part that always gets me. I can do without the meat, but yeah, dairy. I live off of dairy. Okay, so they've started, and yeah, a person just gets used to it. And there we see our little guy playing the clown, being terribly naughty, as he puts it, and everything is striking him as funny, so, he's probably laughing and pranking and doing all this stuff. I'm going to miss that, although he does do it from time to time, even as an adult. He always has that sort of clownish sense of humor. Okay, he thinks it's great that they went to the palace in a carriage. I don't know what they usually went in, but carriage is a generic term. The Russian word is kolyaska, and when I looked that up just now, there were tons of pictures of baby buggies and strollers. So that's what it means now. Obviously, that wasn't what it meant back then. Dmitri would have found that absolutely hilarious. Okay, now Maria has her 16th birthday coming up on April 6th, and Dmitri is in on the secret that GM has gotten a puppy for her. It's a male puppy, he says, a gentleman. It's a fox terrier. I have never been around fox terriers, but as an old movie fan, I always think of the Thin Man movies with Asta the fox terrier. And Dmitri thinks she doesn't deserve it. Well, we'll get into that later about how Maria's behavior and attitude are changing for whatever reason. So, the last thing we have is the books. So the Noble Nest, there are several different possible English translations. One is Home of the Gentry or The Nest of the Gentry. I just did the literal translation, which is The Noble Nest, and it's Turgenev. So I'm really wondering if GM was using the curriculum, the gymnasium curriculum in Russia, if the students in the gymnasia were reading a series of Turgenev novels as part of their curriculum. I would love to find out one way or the other about that. And Dmitri just loves Turgenev far more than I do. I never made it through Rudin. Apparently he finally finished it and has started this new one and finished it, and he loves them both, and I just don't get it. I haven't read The Noble Nest. I need to finish Rudin, and I need to do that. But one thing I can say about The Noble Nest is that it was written in 1859. It involves a man whose mother died when he was a small child and who was then brought up by a strict aunt. So maybe that was something that Dmitri could really relate to. And yeah, if I ever actually read the books, I'll let you know. So he's been spending time with Uncle Nicky in the evening, and apparently he's been reading these two books on his own. And the billiards games with Uncle Nicky would continue. When he was a young man, he would still be making reference to those. So that was something they enjoyed doing together. And yeah, good. So come back tomorrow for the last 2 paragraphs of this diary entries. Bye.